right, welcome to another edition of Radio InfoSide. Once again, our dramatic intro loop is provided by playonloop.org, or is it .com? One of the two. Tonight's broadcast is not going to be a live show. It is actually going to be a slightly edited version of a phone interview I did with someone whose name is Beth earlier this month, and the topic is on the very serious and real happenings of electronic harassment that are ongoing to certain people around the country, and the phenomenon appears to be growing. Beth is a longtime victim of it. Some of the claims out there on the internet about electronic harassment seem fantastical, but I think that after you listen to Beth's testimony about what has been happening to her, I think Beth provides a real good education and a lot of credibility to the fact that this phenomenon is happening, it is real, and hopefully this podcast will provide those who are suffering with information they need to help weather the storm, and also educate people about the reality of electronic harassment so that hopefully one day we can all come together and make sure that it ends. So with that note, let's go ahead and get started with the interview. I encourage you to listen to it all the way through and share it with people that you know. Thank you. So the first question we're going to ask Beth tonight is, Beth indicated to me in the past that she did some research for Ted Gunderson, and there's a lot of information out there on Ted Gunderson, so I encourage any listener that hears this to go ahead and Google more information on Ted. But also, Beth, could you maybe tell us a little bit about who he was and how you worked for him?
You know, it's my pleasure to talk about Ted Gunderson because he was one of the finest men I've ever met. He was a true patriot and a true Christian, and it was an honor to know him. He had his career in the FBI. He was a senior special agent in charge, and he was one of the 3 people considered to be director of the FBI at one time. He also was an agent for Interpol. He was dedicated, his specialty was counterintelligence, for one. And he opened up a satanic crimes investigation unit, the first one and the only one ever in this country, because he recognized that satanic crimes were harming babies and children behind kidnappings and molestations. I mean, he was innovative for his time. What I did for him was I was a researcher in science and technology. Ted, in his retirement, which is when I knew him, visited Congress very often to address certain issues, to get changes through Congress, mainly the Judiciary Committee for Law Enforcement Misconduct. Also, he met with the national security, various people in national security working in Congress. For example, a congressman on an intelligence committee would have a national security representative. And he met with them about threats to national security and the technologies that are being used against citizens he considered and recognized as a threat to national security, not only to citizens. So he addressed that in his activism in his retirement. What I did was I researched the science and technology, and I wrote the reports for him. I wrote intelligence reports. I wrote congressional reports. I prepared for him proposed legislation regarding, for example, lasers, and I interviewed people to submit to him the interviews for various subjects that we were writing on. Some of the reports even went to 4-star General, the Undersecretary of Intelligence at the Pentagon, that I delivered personally. So we had a very wide range of work to do. I worked for him for about 6.5 years, full-time, and he came down with the cancer and became ill, and then he died approximately 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago now.
We'll move to question 2. Could you describe for us what electronic harassment is and maybe some of the more common forms that it takes place, that it occurs to people?
Certainly. Way back decades ago, when citizens were being harmed by electronic equipment, which electronic equipment, in our definition, is everything in the electromagnetic spectrum, which starts with electricity and it goes all the way up to laser. The electromagnetic spectrum includes in that realm radio frequencies, which and infrared and even gamma rays. We're talking about the electromagnetic spectrum. But decades ago, when this phrase was coined, electronic harassment, the attacks on citizens and equipment that we own, our personal property, was at a much lower level. So harassment, electronic harassment, was originally interference with our computer systems, cyber stalking, tapping our phone. It was including boosting signal, so we would have buzz, interfering with the electronics in our home, jamming, for example. That was electronic harassment. Sometimes unusual sound events. That was, and people still use that term, electronic harassment today. But over the decades, since the 80s, when this was really beginning in any significant number, this has increased in terminology. Well, electronic harassment is maybe keeping someone awake at night through an electronic signal, whereas we move on to an electronic assault, where with the technologies that are out there now, people are physically assaulted and physically injured by some of the weapons and technologies out there. And then we've moved into another realm, which is actually technically electronic warfare, just like in the military. So we have electronic harassment, we have electronic assault, and we actually have electronic warfare going on against citizens of the United States and of the world presently. Some of those differences would be, now they have masers, which are amplified microwave beams, to direct at a person's head to stun them remotely, to interfere with the neuron conduction in their body. We have lasers, which we're all familiar with, and infrared. We have projected sound. Now, sound is not in the electromagnetic spectrum. It's a separate entity. It's a wave. But it's used in these assaults. We have sound waves that produce injury, produce symptoms and sickness, can rupture eardrums, can infrasound, for example, can really harm your internal organs, and ultrasound can disintegrate the cartilage in your ears and in your nose if it's directed against you, which it is in some cases. We have warfare now taking place through the military directly by drive-by vehicles and also by aircraft. We have people's electronics being literally fried through electronic warfare by the military, the defense contractors, and we speculate intelligence agencies are involved. But we do know for certain the military is involved and the mercenary contractors are involved as well. So now we have a situation where the use of electronics and directed energy weapons, which sound is a part of that, now are directed in a military-grade level against individuals and personal property, including animals and livestock. And that's the scenario we have now. People are actually being killed, not instantly, They're not just killed instantly with no background, but they're worked up to being killed because military-grade weapons are being used in the United States by United States military and defense contractors and around the world. And so we're under electronic warfare directed to us. Some of it is experimental, and some of it is a lifestyle of taking a person down in a long haul, eventually ending in a death by electronic or by directed energy equipment.
And just if you're listening to this and it sounds kind of fantastical, again, you can go on the internet and do some cursory research here. And I was looking into electronic harassment just kind of at a high level, and I found sites that explained how you can actually take apart like microwave ovens and change them into weapons that you can direct microwaves at people through walls with. And so, I mean, you can go out there and you can find individual cases like we're talking about tonight, and a lot of information on how this is going on. Let's lead into question 3. How do you think that you have become a target of electronic harassment, and who do you think is doing this to you? This is a big one.
Well, I'm fortunate as one of the few people that can answer this definitively. When I was first assaulted, or I was first harassed in the 80s, I didn't know it was going on, and I had the FBI. The FBI was referred to my case through the local sheriff's department, who also didn't know what was going on. So I had an FBI investigation in the late 80s, and it was the FBI, an FBI agent that came to my house after an investigation where they would come to my house, put on white gloves, and open up my mail. They would send a sheriff out to log on to my computer and photograph it, and we had a lot of investigation. And one day, after a few weeks, the FBI agent came and sat in my house and said, "This is being done to you by a group of men who were very, up until recently, based off of Virginia. They are military people from a division of the Navy. They moved to White Plains, New York, where they were very close to a new internet company starting out called Prodigy. They have affiliations with them, and they worked through the information they were able to get on you through that." The FBI agent also told me these have satanic associations. They're Satanists. And I remember when I heard that, I said, "Oh, well, then you're going to arrest them, right?" And he said, "No, it's not against the law to be a Satanist." Now, I can remember that moment. It's been decades, but I was stunned. I was a believer at that time of only a few years. But I was stunned to learn it's not against the law to be a Satanist in the United States, because that subject never crossed my mind. Satanism was not in my world yet. So I knew what was being done to me and who was doing it because I was told by the agent, who also told me that there aren't any laws, there were not any laws at that time, that they could prosecute them for. The Internet was too new. The technologies were not covered. They really could not come up to anything. They said it was a gray area. And at that time, it was what I just described previously as electronic harassment. Now, subsequent to that, that was a start. It was only a start. But subsequent to that, I had the IEEE, that's the industry professionals of electronic engineers, electrical engineering. It's a professional trade organization, the highest reputable organization really in science that I know of. And IEEE people have been to my house and have told me what is being done. They know the contractors and military are doing it. They gave me advice on what to do to minimize my susceptibility and vulnerabilities. One of them installed a Faraday room, converted a large closet, to a Faraday room for me for free. I had engineering companies out who took readings and confirmed to me the readings verified that what they picked up in my house was advanced technologies developed for the military in the city that I lived in. They gave me the name of the company and the type of directed energy weapon that was their finding. These were all PhDs in engineering. They had 28 years of experience. They were court certified for testimony for, let's say, for a freeway development, a noise standard where something had to be measured. They were very reputable. They're not a little company. They were a very large company. I have affidavits from former special forces given to a pro tem judge in my city confirming that they experienced at my property effects that were extreme military technologies. They later came back with their specialized equipment, and they confirmed it. I have affidavits that are notarized by the judge himself with his own thumbprint, and not only his signature notarized, but his own thumbprint, because he wanted to make sure that there was no question about the validity of his statements that he took from this special forces person in particular, who came out with specialized equipment and gave the addresses of my neighbors where equipment was being emitted towards me at my house, and vehicles that were around my house contained it. The verification that I've had, I have affidavits also from people in the Navy who stated various things they observed and they knew about, confirming certain people were at my house outside and what they were doing. Well, I'm fortunate to have my situation verified. I also have a physician who is a Christian, but he manages the health effects this causes me. So I'm fortunate to have a doctor who can treat me. And that's a great thing because most people, physicians, don't believe them. And if they did believe them, there is no information in the medical community about these technologies. It's classified in the military sector. So there's no medical treatment and care for people who are victims of this in society, in the civilian sector. So I'm a fortunate person to have found out from the very beginning who is doing it, who they are, and then over time I've had confirmation of what they're doing, and I've had the benefit of medical treatment. I'm very fortunate for that. I'm blessed, and I thank the Lord for that. It's not a common thing for people to have all of these things in their life as a target, as a victim, which is why that's why I'm able to openly discuss it. I do talk about it. I'm willing to be interviewed and have my name there and such and write about it. It's because there isn't any question. There's not a question in my case. This started in my life when, right after I became a believer in Jesus, Yeshua, as Messiah, I started the first national time-synchronized prayer meeting. The Internet was just coming into our worlds in the later 80s. I forget what year that was, but I know that I started a prayer group and we synchronized it across the United States. So all at the same time, we would be praying. That led to these people, me coming to the attention of these people that I mentioned that the FBI determined were from the military, they happened to have been from a submarine that was an intelligence submarine. That I learned later. But my efforts and the people in my prayer group, the answers to prayers, the power that we were exerting, they were Satanists, and they were military Satanists, and we offended some of them. We took some of them on, some of the things that were taking place on the new Internet. And that is where we came to their attention. Everybody in this prayer group became a target like I did. And we all were subjected simultaneously around the United States to the same types of things. And it's a sad thing, but that's how this began in my life. That's how we came to their attention. And they perpetrated against us, and it grew. This has grown in such a large, organized effort at this point.
Unfortunately, it sounds like maybe what could be going on too is when you offended these military Satanists, they began to harass you guys, and at the same time, the internet was fairly new, and electronic harassment, I'm sure it's been around in some forms for a long time, but probably was just kind of maturing with more groups into it, and maybe like naval intelligence engaging in it. So unfortunately, it sounds like maybe you have become a long-term guinea pig where they've attacked you at an early stage, and now they're kind of doing a long-term test to see how long they can harass you, to test out different technologies on you, to see what they can kind of get away with. So, any comments on that?
Well, the purpose is for torture. This is a program of torture. When they try new technologies and they want to experiment, it's very brief. I learned this from the IEEE, because the IEEE people are the people who develop these technologies, and they are familiar with them, and they understand about human testing, and they've confirmed to me that it's done. It's not done in this manner at all. It's done briefly. This is a program of torture, and the military has goals for these technologies. They want to control people remotely. Like we have drone killings now. Now I think people can understand remote things, whereas a decade ago it was inconceivable to tell someone that there's remote torture that can kill you. But we have drones now where somebody in another country can kill a group of people by a push of a button. And that's the same concept with these weapons and technologies that are used against people. They're invisible because they're energy, and the people themselves are not here. But the purpose of these are to break you, to torture you, to control you. Some of their goals are to create a war without death, because they want to be able to use technologies to interfere with people where now they have to shoot them. Now they have to bomb them. But if they could beam a group of people and disable them and put them into what they call electronic concentration camp, if they could freeze them in a certain way that they couldn't coordinate to walk away, which is one of the things they try, or they weren't able to remember and think for a day. They're using technologies to control people in the long run. And what they do with this is torture. It literally is torture. So they have no-touch torture, which then leads to being able to control, they hope, large numbers of people through technology remotely, using computers, using cell towers, using whatever they can use in their environment, and they can basically control the world, control the people of the world. And I've already experienced how, and talked to a number of people, credible victims, who have, we all have different protocols, by the way. We don't all get the same things. There are similar protocols, but there's a wide variety of them now because there's so many options for them. And they choose the one that damages you the most. They develop your individual protocol based on what's most torturous and most damaging to your health and your personal life. It's based on a case-by-case basis. But their goal is to be able to exert all types of control and influence remotely, taking over even a person's will. I can say that because I've been informed of that. It's a fact. I hate to use the word mind control. It sets off red flags in everyone's mind, but think of it as brain control. It's not mind control. It's neurological control. They have mastered controlling your nervous system, your central nervous system. I know somebody who is an attorney in my state who for 10 years has had certain activities of her life completely interfered with. There's some things she has attempted to do physically, and they literally stop her body from doing it. She's not crazy at all. She's intelligent. She's a target. It's a form of brain control, just like they want to control mood, for example. Wouldn't it be nice for the government if there was an angry mob, which you know they have, Raytheon has the active denial system. It's a millimeter wave. Millimeter wave is right above the electromagnetic spectrum of microwaves. And they're called millimeter waves is because they're short. And they have an active denial system. It's a big dish. And when they discharge a small burst of that, it enters into your body at 1/32 of an inch, where your nerve endings are, and it heats them up immediately to an unbearable temperature, so you instantly have to retreat. That's why it's called active denial. They activate it, and you're denied any ability to go further because you can't tolerate it. That's on the Internet as well. Now, the people where they use that for crowd control, they have to retreat. So if they're still an angry mob, they just can't cross a perimeter, but they're still an angry mob. But wouldn't it be wonderful for the military or law enforcement to be able to discharge a burst where it diffuses your anger, where it activates a different part of your brain at a particular frequency, where all of a sudden you're neutralized? Well, Jose Delgado, Dr. Jose Delgado, who died 2 years ago, he developed that with implants. And you can find that on the Internet. There's a Raging Bull study. It's not a study, it's actually a demonstration, where he put an electrode in a raging bull. And he activated it to make the bull rage. And then he had someone stand in front of it, and he activated another button, and that bull stopped dead in its tracks. And it was completely neutralized. That experiment is decades old. There are no more implants needed to achieve the same results. We know that radio frequencies travel through everything except metal and plasma. That's why you can have a transistor radio or a cell phone in your house without any wires, and you can pick up a signal. It comes through your walls, it comes through your windows. It permeates everything except what I mentioned previously. It permeates your brain. Your skull does not resist, it does not block out these frequencies. And we have locations in our brain that control emotion. Well, they have found where those parts of your brain are, and they can activate and deactivate it with a signal now. Just like if you take your remote control and turn a television on and off, it's sending out a signal, and there's something to receive it, and you get a response. Well, they've been working on that for a long time. Mood management. That is a form of brain control. This has already been demonstrated so many times over. They've even developed something for quadriplegics where they can move a cursor on a computer screen with their thoughts. And so when I say the government, I'm always referring to the federal government. I have a bad habit of not defining them. But the federal government, the Pentagon, the military in particular, intelligence field, and the highest executive branch, the White House, they're interested in all kinds of ways to make sure that everything works smoothly for them, that their problems are solved. For example, at Penn State, there is a program, a college program for non-lethal weapons for the military. That's a terminology. These are non-lethal weapons we're talking about. We talk about active denial system. We talk about lasers. These are non-lethal weapons when used at a non-lethal setting. The same program at Penn State has a parallel program that's identical that's called less than lethal, and that's for law enforcement. And one of the highestly educated person in the country for less than lethal weapons is somebody affiliated with the Los Angeles Police Department. I'm not going to mention his name. I want to say that military technology for taking over countries, defending in war, or offensively going in, the law enforcement areas of our country have been militarized as well, with different names. They have smaller equipment. But if you remember what happened with Dorner, the Dorner case in Los Angeles with the fired law enforcement men who then turned on his LAPD people and began to kill them, his final takedown included military technology. It was not a law enforcement product that an incendiary flashbang device that they used in the house to let it burn down with him in it was a military piece of equipment. It was never given to law enforcement. I happen to notice that because I'm familiar with these weapons as part of my ongoing monitoring of these things. So we're looking at a government, while they don't come out and tell you what they're interested in, what they're really interested in is dominating people in one form or another. Either if there's a riot control, or if there's an insurgency. But dominating people has become more important than killing them these days. I'm not sure why that trend shifted. It may be because technology became available and they recognized, we don't have to go and kill 10,000 people. We can just stop them in their tracks and we can control them. So that's what's happened in our society to change.
Well, it's very disturbing to me that it appears that elements of the federal government are basically throwing out constitutional protections for people and, for whatever reason, targeting individuals, whether they've made the government angry or just randomly selected, to kind of perfect this art of control. Another thing I'd like to point out, too, is I remember, I think his name was General Lamar Alexander, or his last name's Alexander, I forget his first name. He's big on the non-lethal technology. And I think that's really a misnomer when people talk about non-lethal technology. I think it should always be called less lethal technology, because even though its goal is not necessarily to kill you, a lot of these things are still extremely dangerous. I mean, if they hit you with a foam gun, you could still get trapped in the goo and choked to death. Or if they're shooting, bullets at you or firing millimeter wave microwaves at you, it could cause you to have a heart attack. So yeah, there's always dangers to these things. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, you're correct. It's a matter of calibration. These they're called non-lethal or less than lethal. They're two different nomenclatures for two different segments. One's for the military, one's for law enforcement. They use different terminology for the same things, but it's a matter of calibration, because when they used the active denial system for the first time in the Middle East, women around, lots of them had miscarriages, and the operator actually died. It wasn't properly shielded, and that soldier died. I learned this from one of the people from IEEE who also was with the Department of Homeland Security. The information that I have, I don't get it secondhand. I get it firsthand. He told me how he died, how it disintegrated his omentum and his internal organs that just oozed out, and it was a painful death. He discussed it with me. I spoke to him for 10 different days on 10 different occasions. This gentleman from the IEEE who was part of this, putting the active denial system together to send it over there, and he told me what was going on with it. So they are definitely lethal. They are just used at a degree by choice to make them less than lethal, and either by accident or by recalibration certainly are lethal.
So let's go ahead and pick up with a couple comments first. First, again, just to reiterate that it's very disturbing that our government is doing this, that the federal government seems to just be throwing the Constitution out, that there appears to be Satanists involved in this, and people unfamiliar with a lot of the things that go on kind of behind the scenes and in the darkness will kind of go, they hear that word Satanist and they just go immediately kind of tune you out. But there's a lot of evidence of this going on, and I'm glad you've come forward. I'm glad that you made the choice to have your story told, and I think it's excellent that you've documented everything so that if people question you, you can go back and say, hey, look, I've got all this documentation from judges, from former special operations operatives, from IEEE people. I mean, if they're going to the extent to make a Faraday cage or a room in your house, and for people who don't know what that is basically it is a cage of, and you can correct me on this, Beth, but from what I understand, it's a metal mesh, and the mesh is set to be at a certain distance apart, and that distance apart causes radio waves or other electronic communications to break up when they hit that cage, so you can kind of protect communications both inside the cage from getting out and from other stuff possibly getting in. Is that correct?
That is the Faraday cage model for hardware. Yes, it is, the military. The Faraday cage for me as a person, it is a metal lining. It is contiguous, and it's grounded to redirect, to both block and redirect radio frequency range from affecting me. And so your description is exactly the way a building is designed, and hardware in a building for hardware and for communication. For people, anyway, that's what the IEEE did for me. He did it differently, and it was But basically, it's the same concept. It's to block radio waves from penetrating, and it's to ground that. You have to ground that as well. To the magnetic, yeah, it has to also block the magnetic part of it, and that's part of what the grounding does. Otherwise, a magnetic field would build up. So.
Okay. Let's talk about one of the other unfortunate aspects of electronic harassment. You talked about how your neighbors were, how they had equipment installed in their houses that's directed at you. I've read other incidences of electronic harassment where neighbors will actually be recruited to spy on victims. The neighbors might be told that maybe they're like a national security threat or a potential terrorist or something, and the neighbors will totally cooperate with whoever these people are that are behind the electronic harassment. Well, if you could talk about any experiences you've had with neighbors being duped into targeting you or spying on you and things of that nature.
Well, you've researched this really well because you're completely correct in that. Neighbors are a part of every location I've ever lived in, and I've lived in many to try to escape this in the beginning. I've moved often. But yes, everywhere I've been, neighbors are front line to this entire system. They're the interface. And everything you said is accurate. They do spy on you. They do participate in the electronic harassment, assault, and warfare against people. They become your enemies for no reason. They do accept military equipment in their house. They even leave and let their homes be occupied by military and contractors. It is unbelievable. And honestly, I have to tell you, if it didn't happen to me and I was listening to my story from someone else without any background in it, I would be very doubtful. It sounds unbelievable. It even seemed unbelievable to me. I thought I had to be wrong. I thought I had to be suspicious or paranoid. I couldn't believe these people. It seemed like they were doing this stuff, but I couldn't believe they really would. It's hard for me to believe anybody would do that. But it's not just anybody. It's everybody. And the reason they do it is because the federal government comes in, and they're the ones with the power. The federal government, high up, high-powered business card comes in, a legitimate person, and says, here's who we are. And we have an operation going. This person here is some kind of problem. A couple decades ago, the big smear would be to say that men were child molesters, because that was a big trigger point. People would say, oh no, that person, they'd say, yes, that person's a child molester and we are doing an operation, we need your cooperation. And so that was the big thing then. And you hit it on the head when you said terrorist. Now the big buzzword is this person is involved in terrorist activities. We have to watch them. We have to do this. We have to do that. But I also came to the understanding these people get paid. A lot of my neighbors who were Satanists, they talked to me about being Satanists, by the way. They were very open about it. And they weren't kids with T-shirts of heavy metal. They were well-off adults with respectable jobs who are practicing Satanists. That is the standard satanic profile, by the way. It's not a kid on drugs doing something freaky. It is a person who seems like everyone else, judges. The guy who talked to me in detail was a retired military pilot who also was an amateur opera singer who was on the front page of my town's newspaper. when I met him, and he was one of the neighbors involved in it. And he told me the orders come up from up on high. And also he alluded to the fact that they're paid, which explains why they're so willing to give up a good part of their life to be part of this destruction of another person's life. It would be very, I had a lot of people working under me. I'm a professional. And in my industry, I had a lot of professionals that I was responsible for, hundreds of people. I had a very responsible career. And I know that I noticed about these people the first thing off that I couldn't hire people to be as dedicated to the job that I was managing than these people are to this type of procedure, lifestyle, I'll call it. And I couldn't figure it out. And I was speaking to the FBI one day about it, and I said, I honestly, I had an excellent staff. I couldn't hire people that would be as dedicated to, what is this? I don't understand it. Well, it's both a combination of a lifestyle, like a cult lifestyle. These people get taken in, and they cultivate a huge section of their free time to do this. And I thought, why would they do it so relentlessly? And this guy that I mentioned earlier, the retired pilot, they get paid a lot of money. And so they do it both for the country, for the cause, and they also do it because they get a lot of money.
Wow. So maybe this is something I have to look forward to here now. But again, if you're listening to this, this is a good reminder that a healthy skepticism of government is always a good thing. I'm not saying don't trust government all the time. I'm just saying that when someone comes and tells you something and they just have some government authority, don't necessarily automatically believe what they say. Beth, have you ever heard of a guy named Russ Dizdar? I'm kind of rabbit trailing off the questions here, but have you ever heard of him?
No, that name doesn't ring a bell.
Okay. He's researched a lot into kind of the Satanism and cults and the really darker aspects of it, like satanic ritual abuse, and using that to create multiple personality disorders, or I guess what they call now dissociative identity disorder, and programming people to do things with their various broken personalities, not being aware of the other broken personality or alter in them. Just kind of a different facet of this, but it relates back to the fact that there's this large group of people that appear to be involved with dark forces that are a lot more prevalent than people realize. Just wanted to throw that out there. I think you've touched on this already, but I'll throw our next question out there. You can comment on what I just said too. Feel free to comment on that. But what are the common techniques? Again, you've already talked a little bit about a few that are used against you, maybe in the past, and maybe the ones that are used against you currently.
Oh, okay. I'll tell you some basics. I have cameras inside, or I should say, I am recorded inside and outside my house. And how do I know that? Well, in the past, I've hired people that came and scanned. But how do I know that for this very minute? It's because we have some hackers in our world now that can hack anything. And I was able to make some contact with some of these hackers on the Internet. And I told them that I knew, but I looked outside across from my door, and my neighbor's window was cracked just a little bit. And I took a Zoom camera that I had and zoomed it, and I look inside, and I'm looking at a lit camera lens with a recorder. So I mentioned to some of the hackers that I'm recorded by these people. So they went and hacked I gave them my name and my address, and they hacked my property, and they sent me a message that I am not only monitored everywhere, but this is what they said, their words, but your neighbor, creeper, shares everything, or all the neighbor creepers share with each other what they record with they call them fellow creepers. And so, we can record audio by laser now. It doesn't have to be in your house, but they didn't even, these hackers will not communicate with me directly anymore, because every form of communication, every part of my life is completely monitored. So what they do is they have somebody else send me a link, and when I go to that link, there's a message for me there, so that there's no connection to the hackers, because hackers can't, they can't be traced back. That's how thorough my surveillance is. And surveillance is a part of electronic harassment. The surveillance is thorough. Just recently, somebody who worked involving military surveillance took it upon himself also to find out my status, and sent me a message really clearly. It said, "You have no security anywhere in your life, not anywhere." And I said, I know that. So, electronic harassment involves surveillance. It also involves running things down your electric wires. It could be a microwave generating device, so that all of the wires in your house, in addition to an electric current, are emitting a microwave current. Microwave, the same thing that cooks your food. Microwave, the same thing that makes your phone call transmitted. Microwave. And it's all fine when it's enclosed. But when microwave is being emitted in your environment, you're in a microwave oven. And your whole house will emit microwave and make you sick over time. They do that. They also run audio. They run ultrasound. They use ultrasound in the medical field to dissolve kidney stones. When you take high sounds and direct it, it disintegrates certain materials. They run that into people's houses. They run things through the cable. Cable, high-speed internet cable, is microwave. It's a higher microwave than some of the other, depending where you live. They run that and amp it up. It would just be like if you bought a booster for your phone signal, except multiply that by 1,000. And you have huge boostings, not just of you, but the people around you. Or they'll put a microwave emitter in a vehicle and park it in front of your house that's directed to your bedroom window. So while you're sleeping, this beam is penetrating your walls and windows, and you're being bathed in a microwave. Some people have what's called projected sound. It's also called V2K, and that stands for voice to skull. It's a projected sound that is in your head that's just like a thought you can't stop. But it's not your own thought. It's someone else's thought, and it's a voice. They developed it in the military, the Army, College of War. It was under their jurisdiction originally, and then it was moved to the Air Force Directed Energy Directorate. It was used in Afghanistan, and I was told in advance when it was going to be used, and I was with former military when it was used. I was told exactly what was going to happen, and that event is historical. That's when 2,500 Taliban laid down their arms, formed a line, and surrendered. And if you look up that event was produced by a voice the skull weapon called V2K. It was beamed into those men's brains, and they were told that this was the voice of Allah. And they formed a line, they laid down their weapons, and they surrendered. And I was told days in advance this was going to be demonstrated. And perpetrators who were from the military came to me, and we watched it together. So there are so many different forms. You could be bathed in infrasound, that's sub-sound, which could make people nauseated, give them balance problems, where they're dizzy, they can't walk straight, they don't feel, they can't get their position in space. That's another form of electronic harassment. And there are projectiles. There are pulsed energy projectiles. I felt the impact of that. It knocks you down like it. And no, I've never been hit with a punching bag. I'm just saying what it would be like if someone flung a punching bag, the kind the big boxers use. If someone flung that at you, swung it to your back, and hit you when you're unaware, I went down on the ground. I had black and blue marks down my whole side everywhere. And it was boom. It was an energy weapon. They could do something like that to your house. They can run things through your pipes. They can run things up your sewers. Now, those are the lower tech things. Then there's things from aircraft. There's things from vehicles that are vans that disguise their equipment, trucks and vans that are driving through neighborhoods. We now have multispectral imaging, which, well, we know what thermal imaging is. I think most people know that. That fire department uses that, where you look, I think with the Boston bomber, they gave an example of that, where they could see through the boat that the living, remaining Boston bomber was laying down in the bottom of the boat, and you could see the form of his body, temperature, and it was picked up through infrared. So your neighbors can have that. A van can drive by and have that. It's not even expensive. You can buy that for $3,000. They were $12,000 new. You could buy them on eBay. So people can be monitoring where you are in your house at any given time. It's easy. It's cheap. Somebody could be driving in front of your house, and they can scan your house with not just that, but other forms of like radar feedback, where they can see everything in your house, what you're doing, where you're. If you have a weapon, they could see the outline of that. So you could be surveilled completely in your life at all times. And that would mean that you're susceptible to anything they want to do. If somebody wants to steal from you, all they have to do is wait until you go into the shower if you live by yourself. So everything is made to victimize you. That's an example. There are high-tech, for example, the Somali pirates have been, contained with acoustic weapons, long-range acoustic weapon devices. That can be discharged within your environment. That's something that has to be fairly close. These weapons are energy weapons. They do not leave any forensic evidence. You can use a maser against someone or a laser against someone, and there's no evidence other than the damage to your body if there's damage. So these weapons, technologies, can be used against people at any part of their body, any part of their lives at any time, the ones that I've given you examples of. There's no forensic evidence. Law enforcement could come to your house right after you were laid out. They wouldn't find anything because it's energy. And once it's dissipated into your body or your pets or your property, it's gone. And so this is an example of some of the technologies and weapons that can be used against someone in their home. They can fry your vehicle. They can stop your vehicle. They can jam your telephone. They can redirect your phone calls. They can block your incoming calls. They can redirect your incoming or outgoing calls. I have a friend that I can never reach. Her phone never rings because all of her calls are directed. Every time I call her, they say, the circuits are busy, try another time, and her circuits are not busy. She's a target, and they just redirect all her calls. She can't get an outgoing call. She can't get an incoming call. She was a prisoner in her home for 2 years. So technologies and manipulation of our electronics of daily living can be made into a problem at any time. My computers are fried all the time. My vehicle electronics are fried. Everything is fried. The military came into my home and installed traffic light bulbs. They have filaments that are thicker, not thicker, but maybe at least as thick as a very expensive fork prong, an 1810 gauge. The filaments were so large because they run microwave and other things down my electric, and everything was blowing out all the time. So I came in one day, and I noticed, well, that problem was resolved, until I looked up and went to change a light bulb and saw I've never seen a light bulb that looked like this. So I took it to a place and asked him, what kind of light bulb is this? And he said, it's a traffic light bulb. And then I found that all the light bulbs in my fixtures, my outside lights, things where I couldn't see, originally like a table lamp where you can look under, they were all full of traffic light bulbs. And I still have a collection of how they burnt out. They send so much frequency and so many things down my electric lines to bombard me all the time that even those light bulbs fry in a way that a normal light bulb you would never see a flare out like this, where a fire occurs inside the light bulb, and you see the remnant of the meltdown inside of a light bulb. And this is the stuff they can do very easily in your home.
Wow, very very scary stuff. It's like we're going up against this force with the federal government that has unlimited funds, that's very high tech, that can easily get the cooperation of the public, and wow, it appears to be very daunting for you and other victims, which is a good segue to our next question here. Do you have any advice for those people who are suffering electronic harassment?
Yes, I do. I'm so glad to be able to answer this question. And I actually wanted to tell people certain things to help them. And I made notes because I've been in this position for a really long time. And I went through a lot of phases, of course, in adapting and accepting this. It's certainly not normal. I never heard of it before. There's really no help. And so I've come to terms with some things, and I think if a person is unfortunate enough to become this kind of target, the advice that I would give someone for their survival and sanity would be, first of all, to stop reacting emotionally. In the beginning, it's so upsetting, it's so traumatizing, it's so confusing. Your emotions are so high that you appear, every time you react to something, you appear to be having a problem that other people can't perceive. So when you go to get some help or you go to convey it to someone, your emotional state is so frantic, which is a normal reaction to this. It's so frantic that, for example, to feel an energy wave go through your body and the pain of that when they microwave you and you have no idea what it is and you want to tell someone what just happened to you. I would tell someone if they suspect that they're under electronic attack of any kind of their person or even of their environment, to gear down the emotions. That's the best thing for them in the long run. It's a very hard thing to do. But I would say that's the number one survival thing. It will avoid a lot of problems. It'll avoid people calling the police on you. It'll avoid people taking you in for a mental health examination. You will avoid having family members think you're hysterical and not be able to hear the content of your communication because of the package that it's in. And even if it requires taking mild anti-anxiety agents, I believe in that. I believe that survival depends on how you handle this more so than the technology. Because most people end up either homeless because they're fired from their job or in prison because of their emotions, or that they're accused of something, or they lose control of their emotions and maybe hit someone or accuse someone of something, or they're in a mental hospital, or something happens. I've noticed in talking to people throughout these decades that getting a grip of your emotions is a key to long-term survival, and it's a key to getting assistance that you need. I would say that's number one. And number two, I would say join a support group. There are support groups all over the world now through the Internet. There's telephone call groups. There are meeting groups. There are Internet forum groups. Be a part of a group because you'll learn the ropes and you'll learn answers to questions that nobody else can give you. Also, don't spend your money foolishly. I lost such a large amount of money in the beginning by hiring people that put themselves out as being able to solve this kind of problem. And they can't do that. This is a very large government project. That's why it's still going on. For all the people talking about it and knowing about it and being victimized by it, by all my documentation, it has not stopped in the least what's going on, and it's done out in the open. Out in the open. We have aircraft over my house. It's so obvious that people in the CIA have confirmed to me, yes, I can't wait for this to be exposed and stopped. They know about it. It's not a secret. It might not be known to the average person, but it is not a secret in military sectors. It's not a secret in government sectors. Pardon me. So, don't spend a lot of money on things of promises. Also, be very careful about relocating. This goes with you. This is a personal attack. It's not an attack where you live. It's an attack against you as a person. So when you go somewhere else, it's there. They'll just move it there. So when you're making decisions and you're panicking and you have to get away and you decide to put everything in an 18-wheeler and move across the country, when you get to the other end and you settle in a short time, you're going to have a problem again. So try not to spend all your money on things that you think are going to be the solution. I'm not saying that there are not mitigating actions or materials available, because there are. What I'm saying is be careful how you spend your money, because you'll lose all your money and you're going to be in the same position in, years to come. I do believe that some people can be released. They can get out. I was offered an out, and certain terms I was given. I did not take it, but they do let people out. Some people are able to overcome. There are some zones in the United States that do not have any microwave at all. They're dead zones. You can find them on the map. You can go and live there. There are options. There are options out, but they're not easy. You can't just pack up and relocate. So get information from a wide number of sources. There's a lot of disinformation in with the accurate information, because the military is in all of our forums, they're in all of these things providing disinformation. That's part of their sabotage. But over time, you'll be able to filter out what's true for you. You keep your health up with vitamins, minerals, and you read things. A lot of doctors who wrote, Dr. Robert Becker, who died a couple years ago, he wrote a few books, The Body Electric and some other books. There are people who've written books about directed energy technologies and weapons. There's information on the internet, and find out about it. Find out what works for you. Try different things. Try different materials, different techniques of blocking these things in your life and in your house. And keep calm, and then just realize that you can go on. You can go on with your life. It's not going to be the same, but you don't have to make everything about this. And this is one of the differences between me and most targets. Most targets, this is their whole life. That's all they talk about. That's all they do. They're in a frantic state all the time, and all they're doing is dealing with the electronics. I don't do that. I go on with my life as best as I can. I deal with the electronics, and I discuss it and mention it, and I do activism along the way of having a life. It's not a full life, and it's not the life I had. They took away a lot of my life, and I can't have a normal life. But I can have some life that doesn't involve that. You'll learn to bear it up. I learned to bear the torture, to bear the pain, to bear the intrusions and the interferences, and just focus on doing what I can. And I say for anybody who's a victim of this, do not give up your life and dedicate your whole life to trying to expose this, trying to block this, and trying to make everyone believe you. Don't do that. Keep as much of your life as you can, and do what you can along the way of your life. That's my best advice. And I want to add in, and it's not a secret, I have Ted Gunderson's handwritten dossier of his targeting when he began trying to deal with government corruption. He became a victim of this too. And I have his handwritten reports describing exactly what was done to him. And he did not publicize this during his life. He gave it to me to write up after his death. I haven't done it yet. But even Ted Gunderson could not get this stopped. And Ted Gunderson has had movies written about him. Anywhere he went in Washington, the door was open. For people who look him up, he was a remarkable and very powerful American in law enforcement and in Interpol. And he could not get one person to help him when he was targeted with this. But he went on and just went on with his life as best as he could. And I suggest that to people who are targets. The idea, I guess the other thing I want to mention is, a lot of targets are not believed. And I don't think targets should take it personally, and I don't think they should spend a lot of their energy trying to get people to believe them, because belief is not going to change anything. The only thing a person can do is have empathy and understanding. They cannot help you, even if they believe you. So if you find that your target and people close to you, you don't think they're believing you, then just give up the fact of pursuing their belief and just deal with it privately, and then discuss it with people who do believe you or, have that same problem. A lot of people ruin all their relationships when they become a target by berating the people close to them to get them to believe them. They harp on every detail, and they appear to be hysterical, and rightfully so. It's a nightmare of a proportion you cannot imagine. It's the worst life you can have. But the goal is to preserve what you have. You have to toughen up. You have to take it. I believe this is my way. To keep your relationships, to keep your life, to keep your sanity, to keep your reputation, because they trash your reputation along the way. But if people see you as still the person that you were, a credible person, an honest person, a functioning person, a compassionate person, whatever, an alert person, you maintain some of your reputation that they destroy when they take your reputation down as the implementing your targeting. So I would say to people, don't try to be believed. Don't put all your money don't spend all your money trying to get away from it or stopping it. And also, don't take your mission upon yourself that you're going to be the one activist that's going to tell somebody about it, that's going to get it stopped. It's expanding. It's all over the world now. It's not going to be stopped, at least right now. It's a very large program. Believe me, I have spoken to people all over the world who really are targets. They're not imagining it. And so go for the long haul and deal with your panic with people that understand you. Deal with the grief, the horror of it all, the physical pain, the impairment, the deterioration of your life. Deal with it with people that understand you, and don't destroy what you have because of this. And that's my advice. And I hope people take that, because they'll be able to go the distance, and maybe it'll be changed in their lifetime.
I think what you just said, I don't believe I've ever had electronic harassment happen to me, but if someone is having it happen to them or will have it happen to them in the future, I think those very pragmatic steps that you just gave will make all the difference to people. So I hope that if you hear this, that you pay attention to what Beth just said, because I think, like what Beth was saying, it'll be crucial for your sanity and your survival. One other thing that we touched on, this is the next question. Beth, you indicated that you are a born-again Christian. Has your faith helped you in any way during your struggles with this electronic harassment?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I became a believer in Jesus Christ in 1982, and it was only a handful of years after that I became a target of this. I spent my first part of my life not a believer. So I cannot imagine what it would have been like for me to have to go through something like this without the Lord. The Lord is the number one thing in my life. I'm a spirit-filled, charismatic believer, meaning that I do believe in the gifts of the Holy Spirit manifesting in His people now, today, for God's purpose. For me, the Word of God, the presence of God, the leading of the Holy Spirit is the most crucial part in anybody's life, but I could not endure this if it wasn't for God. I have arrived at an understanding with God about, well, God, how can you allow this to happen to me? And why? Well, all that. I've developed an understanding between me and God's will over time. I'm at peace with my life with the Lord. But if I didn't have the Lord, I wouldn't be able to endure a day. And I've never had to, because I already had the Lord. God is everything to me, and I know that I'm everything to Him. This is not from God. God is not inflicting this on me. This is satanic. And because I have Jesus Christ, and because of His resurrection power, I can stand against this in the spirit as well as in the physical world. I'm in an advantage because Jesus Christ prevailed against all this evil. And it's under His foot. And it's just a matter of time, a short time, I believe, until we're taken out of this wicked world. This wickedness is part of the end times. It's going to be around in the tribulation. If you look at prophetic scripture and you see there, it says in the future, there'll be something like a locust, and from its tail there's a sting like a scorpion that stings men for 5 months, and they seek death and cannot find it. You'll find that prophecy there. That describes a helicopter with this exact directed energy weapon in its tail, immobilizing people, and it stings just like a scorpion, just like it's described. And in the end times, when the Holy Spirit's removed and the church is removed and the people go through the tribulation, if you read what they'll go through, some of these very same things can be accomplished by the very technologies that are here now. This is the end times. This is the rising up of the pseudo-Christ. This is all the world of darkness encroaching upon our world more and more every day. It's not unusual that a lot of people who are targets are believers. Not unusual, because this is demonic and it's evil. I believe that this is a part of the times we're living in. And I'm fortunate, blessed, that I have God with me to walk through this, to stand against this, that I have the Holy Spirit to sustain me. My faith is in God and in what God did for this world, for he has overcome all these things. Just because the physical manifestations haven't stopped in my life of these technologies and weapons doesn't mean that God doesn't have the victory over it. And that's something that I understand. This is only in the physical world, and it's a very short amount of time. And really, he has overcome this in me. And I look at it that way. I look at it that this is an echo of defeat, and it's only here for now. But the Lord and we're going to go on for eternity. This that's left behind, this is going to be thrown into the lake of fire, to where death and hell go. And it's never going to be there anymore. But God has a purpose for it. He allowed it. He has a purpose for it. And if you read some of the scriptures of the tribulation, and if you have a background in science and technology, you'll see how these very things fulfill upcoming prophecy. So they're part of the end times, and I look at it that way, so I can accept it without feeling outrageous injustice about it.
I'm going to put you on the spot here really quick. If anyone's listening, how do people put their faith in Jesus and become born-again Christians? Would you mind maybe talking about that for?
Okay. Well, I want to say that God is real. God did create all of us and everything. God is present. God created us for company, for companionship. His desire is to be with us here on earth and for eternity. And he did that because he loves us. Just because we can't see him, and just because someone told us that he doesn't live, and that he's not real, and that we evolved from primordial ooze, doesn't mean it's true. It's not true. God created us, and each one of us are unique, and each one of us are loved. God is multidimensional. We live in 4 dimensions. God lives in multi-dimensionals. We have a linear time-space. He has eternity, which has no beginning and end. It's not linear, not past, present, and future. It's simultaneous. So you can understand the concept of his greatness. You can understand that if you call on him, he will answer. If you have any doubts about God, he doesn't have a problem with that. Just take it to him. Say, God, if you're real, would you listen to me? I don't believe in you, but I think I'll give this a try. Do you know that God will meet you there? If you have a sincere outreach to want to know, he will meet you there. He will bring people. He'll bring information. God is real and very powerful. If you have any desire in your heart for your life to be better, for you to have fulfilled meaning of why you're here on earth and what this earth is for, then just turn your heart and mind and say, you know, I don't know, but I'm willing to ask. If you're real, God, would you please reach out to me? And He will. And let's say then that you have a little faith. Then you have to say, Lord, in order for me to be yours, here's what I have to do. This is what God says. God says that what separates us from fellowship with God is the fact that we're imperfect and cannot meet His standards of holiness. No person can be good enough in their heart and in their life to reach perfection. And that's God's standard. God was perfect. Jesus was perfect. Holy Spirit is perfect. Mankind, not perfect. Now, it would just be like if a person went out and shot 7 people in the street and then went before the judge and said, well, Judge, you know, it was only a one-time thing. Can you just forget about it and let me go? Nobody would do that. The judge would say, you just committed a horrible offense, and you have to have a penalty. Okay, well, it's the same thing with us. We were originally perfect when we were created as Adam and Eve, but we succumbed to a failure. That's called sin. So we succumbed to failure. Now, God, who is still perfect and holy, He wouldn't be able to say in all seriousness, oh, it's okay that you did this or you did that. I don't care what damage you've done, what wrongs you've done, because that wouldn't be righteous and holy and just. So, God Himself, that's why Jesus Christ became a man. God Himself became one of us. And He was born here and He lived and fulfilled the perfect life that we cannot do. And then He took the judgment, the court of God, meted out for us, and He paid that price for us. He took our sentence, which was separation from God in death in the spirit. He took that upon Himself so we wouldn't have to be punished for our wrongs and failures. So, if you understand that part, just recognize you're not perfect. That's all it is. And it doesn't matter what sin you have, because we all have them. We all have different ones. But to God, they're all sin. You can't say, well, my sin's not as bad as somebody else. Well, that's not the issue. The fact that we all failed the perfect standard. But just recognize that in yourself. That is the key to connecting with God. That's what Jesus Christ was for. That's why you go to Jesus and ask Him to be the covering for your sins. Say, Jesus, I understand that you're God in man's form. Perfect. Not man in terms of our nature. You're man as originally was designed. You're perfect. You're God in man. And would you please cover my sins for what you did on the cross? And the answer is yes. You will. There's no. There's yes. If you mean it in your heart, what God does is at that moment, He breathes life into your spirit that is previously dead. And that's what it means by being born again. Just like when you come out of that birth canal and you take a first breath, you're born of the body. When you go to the cross and you ask God to forgive your sins and accept you as His child, He breathes and you take that first breath of the Spirit. You're born of the Spirit. You are born alive in the Spirit. And then you're a child of God. Of course, you need to learn more about it. You need to read His Word. You need to spend time with Him. You need all of those things. But it starts at the place where you go to God or He meets you when you ask Him. And your life has changed for eternity, not just for here. Even if you want to do it for selfish reasons, it doesn't matter. The fact is, you become born of the Spirit, and it's forever. Nothing can kill your spirit. You go on to spend your life on earth walking with God, and then you spend eternity with God.
Very eloquently spoken. I couldn't agree more, and I think the way you put it was I've never heard it any better. As far as getting that relationship with God through Jesus, and so I'm not going to add to it and mess it up. We've got 6 minutes left, so just want to thank you so much, Beth, for willing to step forward and share your experiences with electronic harassment. And I really hope and pray that it helps people out there. And I'm going to do my best to download this MP3 and get it up on the web. And I'll go ahead and send you the links when it is.
Okay, thank you.
One last question is, how can listeners who hear this podcast help you?
Oh, any believers, I would love your prayers. It's the most important thing. And if anybody has anything they feel would help me, if they would contact you and convey it to me, I'd certainly consider it and be grateful.
Okay. The way you can contact me is through email currently. You can email me at radioinfocide, all one word, with infocide being spelled infocide being spelled INFOCYDE. So that's radioinfocide@gmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at infocide. Once again, that's spelled INFOCYDE. And if you have any messages to Beth, I'll be sure to pass those along. So once again, Beth, thank you. This went really well, and I hope this information gets out there and helps a lot of people. So I just really thank you again for coming forward.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciated it. God bless you.
That concludes our interview with Beth. Once again, I'd like to thank her for courageously putting herself forward and sharing all the experiences she's had with electronic harassment since, the 80s, so it's been a long time. So I'm further convinced that this sort of thing is really happening to a lot of people, and I hope that this information goes out, especially the practical tips that Beth listed at the end. I think are really helpful to anyone who's unfortunate enough to be experiencing this phenomena of electronic harassment. So if you'd like to relay a message to Beth, feel free to contact me and I will pass those on. I can be reached at radioinfocide@gmail.com. Once again, that's radioinfocide, infocide being spelled INFOCYDE, @gmail.com. You can also reach me on Twitter at infocide. Once again, infocide being spelled INFOCYDE. Michigan Bob and myself will pick it up with another topic next week, God willing. We'll see you then. Thanks for listening.